Hi, lad.
Aloha.
Welcome to the show.
Yeah, thank you for having me.
So, so, lad, don't take this the wrong way. Most people surf, like normal people, see surfing and they just do normal surfing. Why big wave surfing?
Ultimately, it's something that's in you. I think something that you're born with. You just have this kind of draw or a calling. My dad uh, always said that big wave riders were born, not made, and you didn't make become one. You just were one, and then you have had the opportunity to participate in big wave riding or not. It's just I think it's a just an innate calling to be to that power, to that maybe to that limitation.
Do you think it's almost like a lack of fear?
I think when you say lack of fear, it kind of it evokes in me a lack of awareness, a lack of respect. Somebody when I hear like no fear, I'm like, well, that's just not proper assessment.
Yeah.
I think there's a level of intelligence that comes with fear, that you have to have, especially to it's easy to do something dangerous once, but to live a dangerous life or do dangerous things on a regular basis. That speaks to me in a form. There's a form of intelligence in that, and so you just have a different relationship with fear than so-called normal people, or a fact that you have a relationship at all, and most people really just don't have a relationship with fear.
Yeah, I think that's really interesting because with fear, for example, like I'm scared of spiders, but I know most of them won't kill me. But I suppose as soon as you have that education to realize, well, what ones are safe and what ones aren't, and you understand that, then you're going to approach them in very different ways.
Whenever you're talking about fear, and just fear of the unknown, I think it's that's the basis of fear, is the lack of knowledge. And I think the more that you are educated and the more you understand something, I use sharks as an example. If you don't know sharks and you just think, oh my gosh, sharks are under the water and they're going to
Yeah.
eat me, you have a whole thing that you build up, and your imagination builds this incredible fairy tale. And then you go swim with sharks, and you start to learn about sharks, and then your fear continues to dissipate, and it becomes less and less and less, and eventually you stop really being scared of them, and then you start to admire or appreciate. So
Yeah.
uh, I think it's a lot of it's based on that.
Because for me, my worst fear is I used to say my worst fear was sharks, but then I decided that my worst fear is the ocean because of the complete unknown. The times when I have been in the ocean. So, for example, when I was in the sea in Australia, and the fish just don't give a fuck, and they just bash into your legs, and I was just like, I'm not. This is not my world. I'm not supposed to be here. I know like the definition of a phobia is like an irrational fear. So I'm so frightened of whales, and I know most likely that a whale is not going to kill me. But if I was in the water with a whale, I would probably have a heart attack just because of their sheer size, and it just doesn't feel like my world. And it's so fascinating for me to talk to someone who like you feel the opposite, and you feel a connection with those because the amount of hours that you've probably spent in the ocean, I'm sure your encounters with that sort of wildlife are numerous, and just with the water and all of the natural elements that are really really fucking dangerous are like so vast.
You've just said that the amount of hours that I've been in the ocean and the amount of times I've been around whales and sharks, and just in general, definitely have a sheer appreciation for what they are, the magnitude. I think I mean, again, I go back to what you said, which is you should be scared of whales. They're very big, and you know what? They're not going to try to kill you, but if they just happen to slap you with their tail accidentally
Yeah.
because you were close, you would probably die or break in half. So that's smart. Like, hey, you're supposed. This is a big thing. You're supposed to be scared of it and understand it. And so I think there's a line there. A lot of it has to do with how you respond. The problem when you get scared is, you know, uh, and I tell people this because I've been speaking of, in regards to fear, just given what's been going on in the world. And, if you ever want to see an animal misbehave, scare them and then watch what they do. I mean, they run into walls and they do
Yeah.
all kinds of crazy things. So, how do you respond? If you're in the ocean and you saw a whale and you freaked out and just swam like maybe right in front of it accidentally because you weren't thinking what you're doing, you were scared, versus, hey, there's a whale, maybe I'll just stay real still. If it looks like it's coming my way, maybe I'll move slightly away. So I think that there's, again, your response to the situation. Both people are scared. One guy just freaks out and does something stupid and gets munched, and the other guy kind of, is cautious and slows down and gives him, makes a rational decision. So I think that that's, and that definitely comes from experience and training. And, whether you're in the military and you're in combat, or you're in a dangerous, you're climbing on a rock wall where if you slip, you die. I mean, whatever the form of death is, the more times you've been in the situation, the more educated you are about the situation. All of those things lead you to be more still and more and have better decision making.
Yeah, I can 100% relate to that. So, as a graffiti artist for many years, I made work illegally. And after a while, I got into the zone of being able to switch that fear off, even though I was hyper aware of everything that was going on around me because I needed to be. And especially like painting at height, if I was like at the side of a motorway or something like that, you realize that when you're painting normally, if you just take a quick step backwards to look at your work, which is so common, that's just sort of habit. But when you're 20 meters up in the air, like that's you're going to land in the road. Although I was always aware of it, I was able to. So my hand wouldn't be shaking. I wouldn't be hyperventilating. It was sort of this sort of calming process of, and I suppose it's almost like a meditation. I'm much more sensible now. I don't do these things anymore, but I can relate to that side.
I mean, what you're speaking of is really a form of flow state, right? So at the end of the day, that's a form of flow state when you can be hyper aware, yet you're in an activity, aware of your surroundings, but able to kind of stay in a zone where you're, focus on doing specifically what what the task is. And that is a meditation. That's active meditation. That's why we're drawn to it. I mean, people go, oh, adrenaline, you're adrenaline freak and all that stuff. And I'm like, I appreciate that concept, but for me, I feel like there's a real limitation, because it's a much greater thing than just, hey, I'm doing something to scare myself, and I really like that. And there's aspects of that what you're talking about and what I'm talking about, these are active meditation. These are, and art is probably one of the highest of that. I mean, if you're playing a concerto on a piano, or you're in, or you're painting, or you're cooking, or you're, whatever it is, whatever your art is, whatever your medium is. I mean, there's a level of submersion. You're in it, and nothing else is really penetrating that, but yet you're aware of everything. That's heightened. That's some heightened existence. That's living in the now.
Do you kind of consistently seek that? Because it seems to me that there's people that get to like the top of whatever their chosen field is, and that's kind of, they've conquered that mountain and they just stick at that. Whereas it seems to me that you kind of continue to innovate.
For me personally, I think I really enjoy the process of concept, idea, a napkin, a pencil, wow, hey, and then maybe an understanding of the ramifications, understanding what you're thinking about, how it could be, and then going through that, and then kind of being a beginner, and then kind of being a little bit better and better, and then pretty soon you get to kind of a level where the increments of learning are much smaller, and in a way somewhat less satisfying. So I do like that. I do like that process. It's, I mean, as an artist, you can appreciate just starting a new, being done with something and being like, okay, I'm going to the next. I mean, it still involves a lot of your skills, but you're going to the next, sometime maybe the next medium, maybe the next picture, next piece of art. But I look at it more like that, and I think that that's the way that I've gone about it in order to keep kind of my enthusiasm up, keep me, and I do that with my training as well, where I get bored with kind of the same repetitive process sometimes, and so I'll look for a twist. Okay, do it backwards, do it eyes closed, do it with the left hand, do it with the right hand. It's like do it on one foot or whatever. And through that, things have come out, right? So innovations come from that process, and I think it's you don't necessarily start out with the whole thing like, hey, I'm going to innovate something, but you start out with, hey, I'm going to do something a different way, or I'm open to doing it a different way. And so I don't think that that's the only way, because I'm never satisfied with whatever way that's something's being done, is that's the only way it can be done or it should be done. So I'm and a little bit contrarian in that respect.
What is contrarian?
What is contrarian? I think just going against the status quo, just contrary to, and maybe part of it's to do that for that reason. Some of it's just because your interests bring you there. You're not purposely going out to be different, because I think for some people that's, a contrarian is just like, and I will admit, if everybody thinks that band is great, then I might say they suck just because everybody says that they're great. But that could just be a reaction to everybody thinking something is the right way to go. I think it's again, it's like a mechanism. You asked about big wave riding. I think it's a similar mechanism that there some of us have to continue to kind of force change, maybe or at least to look at things and go, okay, well, not just be satisfied with, hey, that's the only, and it's the thing that probably drove us to go out in the world and keep moving west or whatever, to keep expanding, was that kind of not necessarily accepting things for the way that everybody's doing them, or the way that it is, or that's the way they do it, and all of that stuff that kind of, in a way, I feel that kind of constrains us from expanding.
That's such a rare thing, though. Yeah, because people in general, like we do as we're told on the whole. Like most people are told this is how this thing is done, and then they do it that way, but I suppose that's how the innovation comes, is when you're not satisfied and you are always looking forward.
I quote Thoreau in that, when disobedience is the true foundation of liberty, and the obedient shall be slaves. The fact is that there's something to be said about being a contrarian, or just going against the status quo, and not only just because, and like I said, to go against it, but just because you're not, satisfied that that's the best way, or that's the only way to do things. I think that there's a, and the truth is, there's a lot of satisfaction that comes from going the path that's the least traveled and arriving at a different location than the main road that's just taking everybody, and you get it. And ultimately, it's less about the destination, it is about the journey, right? So at the end, the journey itself is more interesting than when you're just going down the main road with everybody where everybody's going. It's like, well, that's not that interesting. Well, it takes an ability to not care what people think. I think we're influenced so much about wanting to be accepted and to fit in, because that's part of survival. That there's an aspect of survival that's a biological mechanism that we have that keeps us, in order to survive. You got to be accepted by the tribe, and if you're outcasted, you're going to be hunting alone, and you won't be able to defend yourself by like you would if you were accepted. And so I think that so then there's a willingness to be able to stand on your own. There's those mechanisms that you get, that you're maybe a piece of them. a piece of it you're born with. Some of it are circumstances. Some of it's choice. You choose to maybe you were outcasted in your world, and so you were used to that. That was just part of something that you knew how to deal with because you were always ostracized, and so you were like, sure, no problem. I always used to say, people will dislike you that have no reason. Then why would you be surprised if they dislike you if you gave them one? So it's like you're like, cool, no problem. Like, I gave you one, so sure. I mean, you'll do it anyway. So why would you not do it if I gave you one?
Last night with my girlfriend, I was watching Riding Giants, the surfing film documentary that you're a part of.
Yeah.
And it was really funny. Halfway through, she said, if you just took the audio from this and just said that they were talking about graffiti, it would be, you wouldn't really have to change many of the words. And then we sort of got into sort of a mini debate and it does seem to be mostly a male thing. I know there definitely are female big wave surfers, but I don't know if you've ever reflected on like that we have this need to conquer or to just go to those kind of extremes.
I appreciate your diplomacy, especially when you get into male female things. And I'll use this as and this could be a metaphor. And I think life is a somewhat formulaic process. And so I think it's just we're all really not that much different. The fact is we have, when you're somewhat normal, you have 2 eyes, a nose, 2 ears. I mean, you look at people, we're pretty, each uniquely different, but we have some real similarities. So that means we have some real similar formulas and ways we go about doing things. When dolphins are attacked, they create a sphere, and they put women and children in the middle, and then older people, and then older adults, and then on the very outside they have young adolescent males, because they are predominantly the risk takers. That's what they do, and they defend. But in that ability to defend is also an ability that you have these traits that allow you to do certain things better, ultimately, because of maybe you're a little dumber, a couple other things you might need, and there are, and we have there, and I imagine in graffiti it's pretty dominantly male. We're again, what I said a moment ago was, big wave riders are born and not made. You have this innate calling. You're driven to this thing. It's hard to explain. Some of it has to do with you have to be the one to go out and ultimately a big piece of it is that we're more expendable. I mean, the truth is that we're, once we do our duty in procreation, we're good. We don't. I mean, we'd like you to come, bring back some food, but if you don't, we're going to make it without you, kind of thing. So I always go back to biology. It's an interesting thing because it just, there's so many things that we have in us that that can be easily explained when you go primitive. If you just go back and let's go primitive, then because we get kind of technoed out, we get out technologied out, and we kind of feel like, we're so evolved and we're flying around in planes and we have all this thing and we're zooming and we're talking to each other on screens and we have all this stuff. But at the end, our biology, a lot of it hasn't really changed. I mean, it doesn't change that quickly. You don't change it in 100 years. I mean, no, it's like, and so there are aspects, and that I think is a big piece of it, is part of our biological position in the community, and did what you needed to do in order to kind of protect the species, to protect ourselves, and in so being, we get a lot of accomplishment from that. We get a big feeling of accomplishment from that. From that process, that brings us a real fulfillment, that we obviously enjoy.
Yeah, and I think that's the key, isn't it? Is finding that accomplishment. So what would you then say to someone who, because I mean, you're obviously very fortunate that you were, your mum was into surfing, you were pretty much like born in the ocean. And what do you say to someone who is listening to this now but hasn't found their calling yet?
No, I mean, that's a great question. And the fact is that, I kind of talk about it with my children. Um, I quote the movie The Jerk. There's a pretty funny movie, old one called The Jerk. But in the film, the guy finds his special purpose. It's kind of like you got to find your special purpose. You got to find the thing. And, I think a big piece of that is exploration, right? So exploring and looking into things that and listening to your intuitions, but exploring, like looking around, like, hey, try that, try this, try that, and see what calls you. And I mean, if you're fortunate enough to actually find your, and sooner you find it and the more you can evolve it. I mean, if you're fortunate enough that you can kind of make a life from the thing that brings you the greatest feeling of accomplishment and joy, and is the greatest teacher, shame on you, but you have to be thankful for that. But finding that, you might have to subsidize it. I would have subsidized my surfing with, working on tractors or building houses or whatever I needed to do to and I have for a large part of my career, given the direction I chose to go in my career and my lack of participating in kind of the structure of the organized aspect of surfing. I was forced to subsidize and continue on the path and in the journey towards, you could say enlightenment, but ultimately, towards that journey of, in my case, learning how to actually be fulfilled on your own, that you don't need recognition. You don't need somebody to tell you, hey, good job. That was great. Or, you don't need that. When you've done something special or something unique, and how that feels. And so, but I would tell people to find, seek it out and explore. And there is something that calls you, that you're drawn to innately, that you'll love. And it could be, there's 1,000 forms of it. I know we all need an aspect of artistry. I know we need, it's a human need that we need that. We need some sort of, creation. We like to create. That's probably a big piece of, the question earlier, just,
Yeah.
Why are we drawn to this stuff? Because, it's our form of creation. We build buildings and bridges, and, we make things, and we paint things, and we ride things, and we, whatever it is that can bring us that kind of internal feeling of accomplishment.
So one thing you said is that creative people are fulfilled by accomplishing things, and competitive people are fulfilled by beating other people. What do you mean by that? Because I love that phrase.
What I meant is that there are naturally competitive people that just, and don't get me wrong, I'm crazy competitive when I'm going to be crazy off of checkers or any game, anything. I'm going to be crazy competitive, but that's not what really drives me. That I'm driven more by accomplishing things, and that artists are, and that's the difference between a competitive person. There's athletes that are creative athletes, like Pele. Like, he would probably like to win, but I would look at him more as a creative athlete. Like, he probably got more fulfilled by zigzagging between the whole group of people and kicking a unique way and making a goal than he did actually by the number of goals and the winning.
Yeah.
It was just a byproduct of his creativity. In sports where you're measuring, it's more difficult. But in when it comes to creativity, as an artist, you're not going to have. You could have a graffiti contest, but then you'd have to have so-called experts, and then at the end of the day, then there'd be judges, and then you'd be confused. You'd be like, well, how come that guy and he likes him and you like that? And I mean, it never works out well in any sport, other than ones with real tangible increments, like you're fast, you're slow
Yeah.
at the Olympics. But uh, you know, but I think there are runners that obviously are more creative in their running, and that their running is an expression of their thing, and other guys who just want to beat the other guy. That anything he does, and you could be a highly competitive person, and you beat somebody else, but you don't run as good as you could run, but you beat the other guy because he has a bad day. You'd be good. You'd be like, okay, cool. But if you're a creative person and you didn't run as well as you could run, and you're capable of running, win or lose, you would be disappointed. You'd
Yeah.
have there'd be an aspect of disappointment that you'd have because you intuitively didn't. And again, I think part of it is it's the difference between those two is one of them is you're kind of reliant on somebody else to determine your success or
Yeah.
failure, where the other one, you're not relying on anybody, you're just relying on yourself.
Yeah, so one's internal, one's external.
Yes,
It's like, whose validation are you looking for, from someone else or from yourself?
exactly.
So interestingly, you've never surfed competitively, and you touched on earlier sort of parts of your journey where, um, so you dropped out of school and you decided that surfing was going to be your life, but then you kind of turned down big modeling or acting contracts if they weren't right for you, and and obviously was doing construction in order to keep the bills paid and stuff it just really fascinates me that even though you've been the ultimate rebel of like dropping out of school and going, I'm going to surf for a living, which when I dropped out and I told people I was going to do graffiti for a living, they looked at me in the same way, like, you're absolutely crazy. But then even within that framework, you still didn't follow the set path of how you do make a career from surfing, and you were like, I'm going to do it my own way. Like, that must have been like quite a scary, uncertain time for you, because you do have to keep the rent paid.
I had an amazing mom, and she is a big cultivator of imagination. So she really kind of cultivated my imagination, but just the concept of imagination in general. And my mom she could care less if I surfed or did anything. Actually, it was more about how I was as a person, and my values, and how I treated people, and those were the things that were important. But yeah, and I think that unknown of, hey, I don't want to go the traditional route, of 9 to 5, but I'm going to surf, but then I'm not going to participate in that structure either. That definitely led, kind of led to a lot of unknowns, unknowns. But in my mind, in my imagination, or in my intuition, I always felt like if I was able to ride the biggest waves the best, then that would take care of everything. And it didn't actually. That's the irony of the story. But the truth is I believe that I believe that it didn't matter what contest or what you did. If you were the best at the biggest, that was the pinnacle, and that you would be, and that there would be really no way to dispute that you were. And again, and then how do you define the best? Then you're looking for outside things. So my way was, how about just if you ride the biggest waves in the world, like you're going to go out and you're going to surf the biggest waves that have ever been surfed. Maybe that'll take care of it. Like, maybe that'll take, because that'll be defined, but yet that, and of course it didn't, and it led me down a lot of different roads, because there was always that uncertainty. First of all, how to do it, and the uncertainty of, first of all, how do you make a living from that? How do you even get paid? It made me be very creative along the way, and do some things I didn't want to do, and do some things I did want to do. But I, it was interesting. It was almost like I was provided for because of my sincerity. Like the sincerity of my calling. There was almost provision for that. Like, and I'm not saying whatever the universe, however you want to couch it, but there was like almost like it, because you're sincere, genuinely to your heart, and you're living that way and marching that way, you will be provided for. You will be provided for. And I think that's true to life. I think that in life, because sometimes you go through stages when you wonder, like, hey, how am I gonna, like, things are tight, and how am I gonna feed and pay, and I quote the saying, hey, I provide for the birds. How much more will I provide for you? So, so having faith and believing, I think that was probably the thing that helped me along, the continue to stay on course, is just to continue to believe that I can, and that I've been provided for, and that I'll be provided for. And I mean, that seems foolhardy a little bit, I guess.
How did you deal with getting to a stage when you were riding the biggest waves, you were the best, but then the whole world didn't just kind of fall at your feet like you expected it to?
Yeah.
Was that kind of like a shock? Like, and what was your reaction to that? Because it must have been, it's quite a weird place to be, because not many people in the world have ever been in that position.
Yeah, well, that's confusing. It's confusing to be in that spot, and then be like, and then but again, it seems like I was only back to where I'd always been.
Yeah.
So I was kind of familiar with that, which was maybe a little outcasted, a little off the side. And again, and then it forced me to come back to myself and be like, is this, and then I was fortunate to be surrounded by peers and people that gave validation, to the situation, so that I could, because those were the people that I respected, and so they were the ones that whose opinions, and listen, at a certain point, I thought, you could go on and be in your van, or be, just be doing what you do, and no one knows. And it goes back to that saying, if a tree falls in the forest and no one sees it, does it actually fall? I mean, like, if you're riding the biggest waves in the world and doing stuff that no one's done and no one knows, are you really doing it? Absolutely. And so you just have to, you kind of have to use that as like, and you know what, am I going to eat out of a can and have a hard time paying rent and still be doing it? Could well be. Could definitely well be. Could be forever, for that matter.
And how important was it for you to have other people around? Because surfing is obviously like, it's just you, the board, and the water. It's not like there's a team of people involved there. Like, how important was it for you to have a bunch of people around you?
Well, I mean, the truth is that once we kind of developed this technique to ride the bigger waves that had created a barrier, it went from individualism, more selfish, to team. So the mechanism that really made us have a breakthrough was the team aspect. That's what really blew it open. And so then you start relying on other people for your safety.
Yeah.
A big piece of it was the safety aspect, and so that all of a sudden changes the dynamic, of a somewhat soloist activity. Even if you're just trying to capture the stuff, even if you're trying to, like, film stuff so that you have some proof of it.
Yeah.
At least you guys, when you get done with some art, the proof is it's on a building and it's right there. I mean, ours disappears a minute later, and the wave's gone, the ride's gone, and everything's gone. And so you're back to square one. So that kind of, ended up being, and I think I'm naturally, my mom was a highly social person. I think I'm naturally a social person, even though I need, I realize I need to be alone. I need to go and be alone. I think, that's a very important part of kind of the whole system, that, you need that, you know, what do they say, me time or whatever,
Yeah.
that's part of makes you better for the we time.
Yeah, completely. Like I completely relate to that. I always need time to be able to just go and be on my own. And I feel like
Yeah.
if I've been in a situation where it's just me and loads of other people for an extended amount of time, I get like almost like anxious. Like I need to go and be alone for a bit to just like recharge and then come back and give it my full again.
Yeah, I can relate to that.
Yeah, me and Adam were having a discussion recently, and it goes to show how important like peers in your field are so important, because we were talking about kind of criticism, and a lot of our listeners sort of write into us and talk about the fear of getting kind of hate online and all those sorts of comments. And I think it was Adam who was saying that you should only be validated or take either criticism or compliment. You should only take those from people that you respect, which I think is such valuable advice, because if someone is not in your field, then really whether they think you're amazing or they think you're shit, it really has no bearing on. But if you've got a small core group of people who have those shared experiences that really know like that this is good because I've experienced it myself, then those are the people that you need the feedback from.
Well, yeah, I mean, I think that at a certain point you realize that they're just people out there that are unhappy, and no matter what you do, there's always going to be, and the fact is that you can always criticize someone no matter how great what they do is. You definitely need a core group of people that are honest with you too, and kind of like, you know what, that probably wasn't the best way to handle that, or that's not your best, work, or oh, just to keep you a little bit in check. I mean, the fact is that my part of that has turned into my family. You know what I mean? I have my daughters, and they kick me in the teeth every time I get out of line. So, I have that. That's the next level. First, you go from peers to then you go to family and daughters, and and then they really have something to say. But yeah, I think that you do need a core group of people that you respect, and that are that are going to be, they're going to be truthful to you, because at a certain point when you subject your art, your philosophy, just any of what you are to the world, you're going to have a certain percentage, no matter what. What they say, out of 10 you'll have 2 that hate it,
Yeah.
and 3 that think it's great, and then 7 that don't really care. So at a certain point, it's you're I think it's very important very important to be cautious with being influenced and trying to steer to try to please always. I think that there's a
Yeah.
lack of sincerity with that, which means you're not going to go too far right, and you're not going to go too far left, and it's going to, and I think you're going to not be, and I think we all fall victim to that. I think no matter what we do, I think there's a certain level of, of governing that we do. I can say that for sure in my life, that as that even my behavior has been influenced by the fact that I can have influence on young admirer, like my children, as a most immediate example, but you outside of your walls and your house too. So that kind of has a tendency to influence the way you behave, which is probably good, because I think if we didn't have any kind of restraints, people could say, oh, more honest and more pure, but I don't know. I think that sometimes maybe it's kind of like, walking in nature and there's a big cliff. I mean, if you step off, you fall, you die.
So you've obviously had mentors throughout your career. How important has that been for you?
The fact is that, we're monkey see, monkey do, right? So, or monkey see, monkey don't do. But the truth is that I've had men throughout my life that that I looked up to and respected. And then I've had men that I maybe looked up to and didn't respect, or just there's aspects where you're like, hey, maybe I won't do that, but I'll do that. Like we cherry pick, so we go through and kind of cherry pick attributes and things that we admire, or we see behaviors that we would like to try to avoid as well. So sometimes that type of teaching is greater. But I've had most of the men that I admired, uh, had uh, they were good family men. They were family men, and they had a level of courage and a level of empathy and a level of tolerance, and just there's just attributes that I am attracted to, so that I've gotten to that I've been exposed to. I've been exposed to some pretty amazing people in my life, and so that's been a fortunate thing. And then part of it is, I think, when you're a husband, and then you're a dad, um, th- you know you maybe want to be maybe the one that you maybe thought you wanted, um, and then you see the result of that on your children, and you're like, whoops, maybe I didn't want that exactly. But I think that's all part of the lessons of that, and how that, and then maybe you can sympathize with your you don't sympathize with your parents until you become a parent, kind of thing. And so I think there's aspects of that, but mentors and people I looked up to, like I said, I had an amazing mother, and or have an amazing mother, and then I have an amazing partner, a girlfriend, wife, mother of my children. So I have that aspect, and then I have men that I admired and uh, and respected, and then I try to maybe be like that, you know.
So, in your role as a mentor or as a father, what do you think are some of the main things that hold people back from living their best life or achieving their goals?
Well, I think that there's a saying, we are each our own greatest inhibitors, that we hold ourselves back more. Part of it's fear, you know. I think that you know, I think fear of failure stops us from doing anything, and so I think we use excuses to find a way out of exposing ourselves to that possible failure. And so we'll be like, oh, now I have a family, so now I can't do that. That kind of a thing, where you're kind of like, you know, that's okay, but that's just a way out, like, in my opinion. And there's some truth to that. Okay, you make adjustments, you have a family, you can't just run around like a single guy and act stupid. That's true. But in a way, ultimately, you'd find that, through that lifestyle, that you'd actually be able to be more uh, precise, and actually probably better at whatever it is that you're interested in achieving or doing, or whatever you've set up for yourself. And you definitely have a lot more incentive when you're providing for other people, and you're being an example to other people.
So, if you're a younger person looking for a mentor, how would you go about finding one who would be right for you?
Well, first of all, I think I think that's dangerous, to put that kind of pressure on anyone. Like, like, hey, you're going to be my
Yeah.
mentor. Kind of like, wow, that's some pressure. Like, um, you know, and no expectations, no disappointments. That's what we always talk about the ocean. Like, if you expect there to be a giant swell, it probably won't happen. A little bit like in life, don't put some expectations on a poor guy and then be disappointed after. It's kind of a setup for failure. That's a tricky thing. I I think I always had a desire to want to be an example when I was growing up. I think I wanted to maybe be the mentor I didn't have or something like that. But that's you got to be careful. My mom used to say, the way God punishes you is that He gives you what you ask for. So
Yeah.
you gotta be careful with that, because that could be a bad setup. But I mean, I think if you want to be good at something, if you're really interested in something, I think, I've always said, um, go where the people are the best at it, and you're going to become better just by
Yeah.
osmosis, just by being there. If you're interested in piano, you go where the best piano players are in the
Yeah.
world. You're going to get better at piano, or whatever that is. If be around like-minded people. Like if there's people that if you're interested in business, then look for someone that you respect, that does business in the way that you would like to do business, and you're going to inevitably get better at business. So, um, I think that's I have a thing that I talk about with Gabby called the honey line, where if you find a bee, you follow a bee, and then you find other bees, and then eventually you follow the bees, and you go to the bee's nest, and there's honey and there's bees there. And if you follow a wasp, you'll find another wasp, and pretty soon you'll end up at the wasp nest. So, you know, I think that's a metaphor for life as well. Like, you just seek out, people that you respect or you
Yeah.
admire, and their approach, follow them, and there's other people that you find, and then pretty soon you're in a group of people that are doing things in a way that you admire and you respect, and you're gonna inevitably, improve.
Now, we've already established that you've always gone against the grain. But the stereotype of a surfer is someone who's kind of like free and easy and goes with the flow. For you, it would appear to me that kind of structure and regiment are like really important parts of your life. Is that
Yes,
an
yes.
accurate representation?
Yes. I think, the fact is that I think that there is a ultimate freedom to structure. What do they say? There's a predictability in chaos. I think that I mean, if you think about it, the sun rises every morning, and it goes across the sky, and it sets every night. That's pretty predictable. That's pretty disciplined. And so I think that there's something to be said. I think you have to have a level of structure to have true freedom. Otherwise, you're at the mercy of freedom. And then you're free, but then somehow you're constrained. You're the most constrained,
Yeah.
right? And so, in a little bit, it's kind of a little bit like, you have to play within the system to have really freedom. There has to be a level of, I mean, the truth is that I've set my life up pretty much. I mean, I have what we call the 20-foot clause, which is, I have, if I'm obligated to do something, I have a clause that like says that if the surf is bigger than 20 feet, I'm not going to make it, and it's like, and so but that is something that takes structure, that takes a consistency, a discipline, a level of, there takes a level of discipline to have true freedom, is what I believe. I believe, to ultimately be free and to be able to do what you want when you want, you have to do things you don't want all the time. There has to be some stuff. There has to be a level of thing. So in order to make it so you can do it again and again, it's easy to just be like, I'm free, and go off and do something. And then you're like, and then you come back, and then you'll be more constrained than ever. Where if you're just kind of dissipating it along the way, it keeps you in a at least that's what I've found has worked for me, given what I'm trying to do.
It's almost like people aren't searching for freedom, they're searching for the ability to have choice.
Mm.
Because as you said there, it's like, yeah, if you get the freedom, then it's like there's nothing. It's just you and free. Whereas it's the ability to set up a structure that gives you as much choice as you want, I think that's a lot more powerful. And I think that's what people actually really desire.
Well, that's freedom. I mean, freedom to choose, right? Freedom to, hey, I don't want to, I
Yeah.
want to, I'm going to, I'm not going to. I mean, this is what we're looking for. I mean, in a way, that's what money represents to people, right? So people think, well, if I just get this, then I can just choose whatever I want. The problem is that then there's a whole nother level of complications that's added to it that people don't consider, that actually become kind of a little bit of a slave to that. And sometimes when you have too many choices, you can't make a decision at all, which that becomes constraining. All of a sudden, that's almost like
Yeah.
that stops you from actually being able to, to actually choose. Paralysis by overanalysis kind of thing, like no choice by too many choices. Like you can choose anything, so you can choose nothing. They say one thing, that the only two things that happen to people as they become wealthier is that they become less empathetic and they become more spontaneous. So they just buy everything, sell everything, like, and those are like knee-jerk reactions, I guess, to the ability to. So it's nice to have some governing, a little bit of, I mean, just look at nature, the way nature kind of governs us. I mean, there's gravity that keeps us on the ground. But if you go walk to an edge of something, you fall off. There's some things that there's rules, right? There's universal laws, and I think there's, to be truly free, you have to have a level of kind of predictability, that to be able to truly move the way you want to move, and not just I'm free, but then you're like at the mercy of all these other laws that.
Yeah, I suppose it's defining what freedom is before you get there.
Well, that's yeah, exactly. What is freedom ultimately, right? Like you said, like
Yeah.
what's freedom to you might be different than freedom to me. So that those are going to be personal choices. But I think there is you know, I think that no matter who you are, the ability to choose, you know, is probably an innate part of freedom, right? That choice of I don't want to, I
Yeah.
want to.
I've got a little quote here, and I can't remember which documentary you said it in, but you said, "I don't want to not live because of my fear of what could happen," and that's quite a powerful statement, given that what you do is very dangerous, and you are obviously aware that, and I'm sure you've had friends that have passed away doing what you do, but is it because I think from the answer of this question, people will perhaps be able to look at the things that they're worried about that perhaps don't have so much of a final or massive risk. So why is it that you would rather put yourself in those extreme situations than not face that fear?
Because I wouldn't want to jeopardize the opportunity for the reward of experiencing that, right? I wouldn't want to. I mean, the truth is that I could create a scenario in my mind. Again, here we are creating, blowing things up beyond. It's back to the sharks again. Blowing things up bigger than they are. And so I wouldn't leave my house, right? I wouldn't go outside. Like people have that. They don't. I can't even go outside because if I went outside, I could fall down the stairs and then a car would run me over, or the thing, or the bird would yeah, whatever. They just a million things that are imagination, and to live a life responding to that, to all that little voice in your head that is designed ultimately to protect you, right? It's trying to keep you safe, but in its optimum effect, that would mean that you would just kind of probably not leave your bed. You would just not move. You would just be
Yeah.
like, don't move.
It's almost too
Too
efficient.
efficient. That's what it's designed to do. It's designed to, if you fall victim to it, and mine is just happens to be a very exaggerated version of it, but it's the exact same thing. It's again, it's I keep saying life is a formulaic process, and whatever the background is, whatever the fear is, whatever whatever you're. I mean, I just happen to be dealing with we talked about this where you have a fear envelope, and and somebody's fear envelope is is this big, and then you go outside of that and then it's that big, and then you go outside of that and it's that big, and then it eventually expands, and then my fear envelope just happens to be like this, and somebody else's might be like that. But if you don't go outside of it, if you're not willing to kind of push the thing, then you're just constrained by it. Then it becomes like an imprisonment. And we always talk about don't react to what hasn't happened yet. Don't react. It hasn't happened yet. Like, wait till it happens and then react to it. But we're always trying to be so cautious about being ready for when it happens. We can do it, but if it hasn't happened yet, then you might actually make a move that when it does happen, you'll have to respond to the move you made and what it is, and which would make you not do very well. It would make you probably do the wrong thing, or be reacting from what what you were thinking it was going to be than it really was. And again, these are teachings that for me that that the ocean continues. Like, I call the ocean the grand master, and the ocean is that's like the grand professor, and the lessons that you learn there, those are all part of you see a wave coming, you're thinking, well, if that wave hits me and that the thing, and running all these scenarios. But listen, you don't have to ultimately it's until it hits you, you don't need to respond because that would only use up energy and probably force you into the wrong maneuver, the wrong response.
Yeah, I suppose that by being in those situations that you've been in, it must give you such a perspective of when people are getting really like het up about silly things that really are unimportant. When you've been in the middle of that storm of like being plunged underwater and not knowing which way is up, and because we always say that like nature is so beautiful, but like, I mean, I've been in the ocean and touched those rocks that are like so sharp that literally they will just slice you if you just put a finger on them. And yes, nature is beautiful to look at, but to be encased in it is just absolutely fucking wild at times. And so I suppose that then when someone like cuts you off in traffic or something, it's just like you've seen a bigger picture.
No, and it's true. I think what's interesting is you think you'd hope that it would have that effect, that you'd just be like, and I think, I mean, at this point in my life, it's a lot different than when I was, young and full of testosterone. Now I'm just older and full of testosterone. But the truth is that it definitely, I mean, what do we say? Don't sweat the small stuff. And, I have a friend that's 7 feet tall, and he says, small things for a giant. So, but it's a metaphor for life, like small things for a giant. It doesn't, and you have to remind yourself, because it's easy to get caught up in the minutia of the pettiness because we humans are extremely petty, and I'm not sure why. That must have been useful, helpful in our evolution. It must have been, because there's so much of it. I'm like, well, I wonder how this plays out in evolution and in our biology. And there must have been a reason that it was functional to be petty constantly. I feel like I can get caught up in some of the minutia of the day-to-day pettiness, and I have to be conscious of that. I think one thing I always there's a great Napoleon quote where he would, whenever he'd get a letter, he'd put it in a drawer, and then he wouldn't open it for a month. And then when he opened it, the first letter said, like, send the army, and then the second one said, send half the army, and then pretty soon, before you know it, like, don't send any of the army, we don't need the army. And had he responded to the first letter, he would have sent the whole army, but after, he didn't really need to send all of it. And so, it's like measure twice, cut once, give yourself some time to respond to stuff. I think I have a natural ability to operate well in chaos. I mean, I've been in floods, I've been in fires, I've been in hurricanes. I mean, I fortunately, I haven't had to go to war in my generation. But the truth is I have a natural ability to operate well in those environments. So it does make it a little, I think it's hard not to be provoked by sometimes human behavior. Sometimes, like when you see people behave in a certain way, you're like it's hard not to be provoked by it because of the sometimes the sheer ignorance of it, and maybe it's connected to something that provokes you in a way that maybe they're a liability, like to you in your community. If they're going to act like that or think that way, you'd be like, this is a liability, and you're like, you have a visceral reaction to it. But I think through time, through breathing, through meditation, through training, through all the experiences, you start to you have ways to approach those situations in a way. And there's a great saying, not their burden. Not their burden. And so sometimes I think it's easy to go, God, I can't believe the thing and why they're so petty about that. But not their burden. And people have burdens. We're all burdened by something. It's living is burdensome.
Life. Yeah.
And it stacks up. It stacks up.
It certainly is.
How important is youthful enthusiasm?
Mandatory. That's everything. That is probably one of the fountains of youth. So the enthusiasm, to be enthusiastic about life, about interested in things, to be interested in things like learning, and I think that's the key element to first of all being interesting, and second of all to be inspired. Like, because if you're not enthusiastic, where's the inspiration? You're just going to be like, and then you're going to stop having fun. Which once you stop having fun, that kind of just shoots the whole thing down. Then you're walking around half dead. Which is, we have a big portion of our planet. With people walking around that are just, they're just, they're already done. And it's sad. It's a sad state of affairs when people have, a big portion of their life still ahead of them, and there's nothing to look forward to. There's nothing to be excited about. Another a quote that kind of goes with that is, never let your memories be bigger than your dreams. I think that's a beautiful thing.
Well, Laird, this has been incredible. Thank you so much for your time. We really, really enjoyed chatting to you. Could you let everyone know where they can find you online?
Take Every Wave is my recent documentary. I have a book called Life Writer. I have a fitness and wellness kind of lifestyle program called XPT Life. I have ultimately a superfood company, Laird Superfood, and they have some incredible information about just nutrition stuff that we kind of believe in. LairdHamilton.com, I Instagram, and I know there's some other stuff, but I can't keep track of it all. I appreciate your time. You're both gentlemen. Aloha. Aloha. Bye.
Aloha.
Thank you.
Thank you,
Take
dude.
care. Thank
Take
you.
care.